Hi Deb, so that is an excellent question. If you're experiencing lower back pain, how do we test if it's the pelvis and what can we do to fix it? So that's a loaded question, let me start with that. Because really it's like asking what came first, the chicken or the egg. Did your pelvis misalign and that's what's causing your pain? Or were you already in pain and so now your pelvis is kind of like deviating to kind of like run away from that pain? So that's going to be the first part that we don't know just yet. But let's talk about like what are some things that you can do to assess the pelvis, and then from there, what are things that you can do to help put things back into position. And I'll kind of give you like a few things, whether you're actively in pain versus not actively in pain, because they're two very different things. And obviously not in pain can be a lot more proactive and functional in the movements and exercises that you do. So first, we're gonna start with, we wanna assess first, right? In our process, we assess, restore, train in everything that we do. So we want to be able to assess first. So if we're looking at a postural analysis, we want to be able to look from the ground up, and we need to start with a neutral base. So if I am using the floor, right, I've got the grain of wood that I can line up with, and I've got my feet about fist width apart, about 4 inches or so. All right, and then from here, I want to take the second metatarsal. So imagine like if this is my foot, I'm gonna take my ring finger toe, or no, my pointer, my pointer finger toe, and I'm gonna take that bone up here in the forefoot, and I'm gonna make sure that that's straight, because if I have a little bit of deviation here, then everything that I try to assess, I'm gonna have to take those degrees of change at every segment above it. So if we just start with a neutral base, making sure toes are facing forward, that's gonna be number one, okay? And then from there, we can look at, if we're looking specifically at the pelvis, we wanna see what deviations are going on. So in that one, in the video that you commented on, we were talking about slope, okay? So slope of the pelvis is gonna be, if we're looking at it like this. If I take my hands and I keep them flat, and I make like little knives here, and I press into my abdomen right about my belly button and then drop down, I'm gonna find the bone. I'm gonna find the iliac crests right there. And then from there, I can look in a mirror and I can see, okay, how are my hips? I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna watch this video and take a look, how are my hips? Do I have one that's a little bit like this or vice versa? Now another portion of that though is gonna be rotation, because if you're gonna have, it's pretty rare that you're only gonna have lateral flexion. So we wanna also look at rotation. So to find that, we find, if we follow that crest and follow it in front, we find the ASIS. So those bones there, it's the hip bones that stick out here in front. And I can find, we wanna make sure that we're on the same spot on both sides, and then we can look straight down. And essentially, we're gonna see, I'm gonna exaggerate this, but do I have one that sits more forward or one that sits more back? And then let's take Frank. He wasn't in trouble in the corner, I promised. I was just using him for examples. All right, so that first one, we come in right through here, drop straight down, and that's gonna show us if there's a lateral tilt going on. And then rotation, we follow it down, find the ASIS here and here, and we're looking to see if there's a rotation taking place. So that is gonna be able to tell us, okay, do we have, that's assessment of the pelvis. Do we have a rotation? Do we have a lateral deviation? If we also wanted to really get picky, we could look at anterior tilt versus posterior tilt. So if I find if you find your SI joints, let's keep it a little bit more simple, okay? Find your SI joints, we find there's a bone here, and then we've got PSIS, ASIS, okay? And what we're looking for on females is gonna be, there's averages, right? But then there's an individual's normal versus somebody else's normal. So usually about a 1 to 2 inch where there's a slight anterior tilt, they're not gonna be equal. If it's equal, that's actually a posterior tilt. So the ASIS is usually a little bit more forward, especially more so on a female than a male. But what by how much is based off of you and your anatomy. So really what we're looking for is, are they equal? If you have a symmetry from side to side, you're doing great. Now this is probably way more than you want, but it's fine. Better to give you too much information than too little, right? So if I'm here and I've got, so this would be my right side. I always have more of an anterior tilt anyway, but if I go here and here, there's where I am, versus if I were to have a posterior tilt. But what we're looking for is symmetry. So if I go to this other side and it's the same, great. You don't have to mess with it. Leave it alone. But if you have one side that's really forward and one side that's pulled back, then that's like taking this whole pelvis and it's all jacked up and twisted. Which obviously, if I've got one side that's like this and the other side that's like this, yeah, it's going to cause problems. That was more advanced, but I'm sorry. I hope it's okay. But from the lateral flexion, let's go backwards a little. Lateral flexion and rotation. If we are not in pain, thank you, Frank. Move him out of the way. Okay, if we are not in pain and we've got a rotation. So if I've got my pelvis and let's say that it is rotated to the left, okay, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna load that glute because the glute and the lat on the opposing side actually work together. So if I have, if I've got this rotation here and this rotation here, so I'm rotated to the left and I wanna fix that, I'm gonna load and I'm gonna do lunges on this left side and then coming up. Or you can do an isometric and add a hold, but you want something here in front of you with a pull. And so that way you're creating a challenge there. That's probably the fastest I can make hips move in about 10 minutes, or pelvis move in about 10 minutes. Now, obviously, we've got to reinforce that with other things, but it's an easy thing for helping to realign rotation of the pelvis because it all goes in systems. Okay, and then lateral flexion. Again, if you're not in pain, because if you have lower back pain, this is not going to be comfortable. But let's say that I have a lateral flexion like this. So an easy one that I can do is take this foot, let it hang off of a stair, or even it can stay like this too, and lift up. Lift up. So if I've got lateral flexion this way, I want to correct it by doing lateral flexion this way. And that's an easy way to fix that one. Now, if I am in pain, so usually causes for lower back pain, oh, that can go big. Where do I want to start? Okay, let's start with just gaining some stability. So the lumbar spine, if you notice, like the whole human body goes from mobile, stable of joints, right? So if we look at the shoulder, mobile, stable, mobile, right? Same idea down here. Mobile, stable, mobile, okay? Then it happens again. We've got mobile, stable, mobile in thoracic, stable, okay? So each of those places, so for the lower back specifically, it's meant for stability. So what we want to do there is work on our core, work on our breathing. This is probably the biggest thing when it comes to lower back pain, is breathing through the diaphragm and not through the chest so that we can create stability here. And then like once you can get and work on core stability and breathing properly, then adding things like a little march is going to be huge. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too much, and I love you. Bye.